Hello and welcome to Ivory Blush Roses. My name is Lisa and today we're on our last week of chain stitch. I have 5 interesting chain stitches for you, and a couple of them fall in crossover categories where they could be either in one stitch category or another. In past videos I've gotten the question about, isn't this really a this stitch or a that stitch? And the reality is these stitches have so many names and they do cross over into categories. The ones I've included in chain stitch have all happened because they involve a loop of some kind. By stitching through that loop, that's what puts it into the chain stitch category. Now they may also have other things, like today we're going to see one that's sort of a buttonhole stitch. We're going to do one that is sometimes put in the feather stitch category. Occasionally you'll see knotted stitches that also will fall into a loop stitch category. It just depends on how you want to classify that. I sometimes look at the Royal School of Needlework website. I also look at a large number of books when I'm working on these videos. Occasionally, like last week with the wheat ear stitch, I start stitching on my own the way I have always done a stitch, and it wasn't until I was in the editing process that I realized that I wasn't doing it the proper way. Most of the time, these stitches are done the way that you're going to see them in the majority of books, but the nomenclature and the naming of them falls all across the board. It just depends on where you see it. I actually have one old embroidery book that doesn't put any names with stitches because it says there's too many, and so how do you know which one is the right one, which is actually really frustrating. I do like putting names with things, and when there's more than one name, from here on out I'm going to try and make sure I'm sharing those names with you as well and see if that helps a little bit. Let's go ahead and get started. In the frame I've got a 5-seam block. This one does have an open edge here, but we're going to be stitching that down. And I think that most of these stitches we're going to stitch sort of on top of the seam rather than across the seam, except one, and the one we're going to stitch across I'm going to do down this one, so that will hold that down nicely. The first one we're going to do is called a Basque Stitch. For me, I'm right-handed, so I'm going to work it left to right, but you can work it right side up or upside down. So it just depends on what your preference is for working it. I learned this one upside down, so that's what I'm going to show you, and we're going to do that one here on this seam. I think the Royal School of Needlework actually puts this one in the cross stitch category, but I think it's actually should be in the chain stitch category, and in a lot of the other books that I have, I've seen it listed in the chain stitch category. And I'm actually wondering, should I mark that seam? This is one that I probably normally would not mark. I would just eyeball the spacing, but sometimes having those marks can make it just a little easier. My recommendation is always to minimize your marks. I don't want a lot of stuff on my block. I've come out down here, we've marked at 3/8 of an inch along the seam. On this one, it's one of those that I'm actually going to really try and scoop stitch this one. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to bring my needle down, and I want to do that because once I have the thread going behind the top of the needle, now we're going to bring it over and cross it under. I have found it helpful with this one to bring this first stitch, bring this here where it came under the top of that needle, pull that a little snugger, and you're going to see, so here's where it crosses, and that's why some people put it in the cross stitch category. Now, like a lazy daisy, I'm going to just go down and I'm going to lock that in. Now I'm going to come up over here, and that will also help lock in that twisted stitch and hold it in place. So we're going to go put the thread up. I'm going to stitch down. I want my needle perpendicular to the seam. I want to come out fairly even with it. So before I put my needle through, I'm going to pull that stitch tight, cross it over, loop it under the needle, And I'm going to pull my thread out straight so that I know it's not as likely to knot. There. And then we're going to make our catch stitch. And then we're going to come up here on the inside of that first thread. Now holding it up, go down at our mark, my needle perpendicular. You could always draw a line if you need. I've got my seam underneath there, which I don't know if on camera you can see it, but I can see it in real life. Before I take my needle through, I'm going to pull that thread tight over the top, cross it over, and thread it under the bottom. And then pull it through. And you can always pull that a little bit if you need to. Now we're going to lock it in place and come up here to lock that in. And we're doing that because if we don't, that thread is going to come over this way. So again, we're going to go up, put my needle down, bring it down straight, perpendicular to the seam. Before I do anything else, bring that thread down, cross it over, tuck it under, and now I can pull my needle through. And I'm real happy with the tension on that one. And we're going to lock it and come up right inside there. Go up, go down at my, whoops. I keep wanting to go and stab stitch these, and that's not going to work on this one. That's going to be long there. I must have a little bit of extra fabric right in there, so I'm just we're just going to go with it. That's where it seems to want to be, so we're going to just leave it there. So we're going to go under the top of the needle, cross it over, tuck it under the bottom, and now we can pull through. Now you can do these stitches much closer together, and it definitely looks great when you do this one in a heavier thread. And I have seen these where they're really literally right next to one another to make sort of a braided look to a seam. And that's got a nice appearance to it as well. So there's my needle. I've got my thread tucked under the top. We're going to cross it over, tuck it under the bottom, and pull the needle through. And I didn't pull my needle down the thread, so I need to pull the thread out. And now I need to do that. Lock that stitch in place. Oh, got a little knot there, just pull it back out. It looks like it should just pop right out. There we go. And now I'm going to come up inside that thread, make sure it doesn't lean over, go down, come up, but I had my thread over so it's already underneath. Get my other thread out of the way, cross it over, tuck it under, and pull it down, and then lock it in place. Come up inside at the top, lift it up. That will make sure that that thread goes underneath my other threads. Come perpendicular, come out, bring that thread under the top, cross it over, tuck it under the bottom, and draw the needle down. lock it in. And even with that short little bit, I'm going to come up on the inside because I want to lock that thread so it doesn't end up pulling diagonal here. And then we're going to just do a straight stitch off. And I'm actually going to go ahead and lock that in on that loose seam. And that is Basque Stitch. It's an interesting look to it with that twist in it, and you can kind of move that twist down if you'd like. With thicker thread, sometimes you can see that a little bit more. But it's an interesting stitch and just adds something a little bit different. Almost in the buttonhole stitch category. So let me turn that over and make a knot, and then we'll do the next one. The second stitch we're going to do is very similar to this one, but it's not going to have this little crossover. It's often called a petal line or a looped blanket hole stitch. I have also seen it referred to as a pendant chain stitch, and that would certainly be if you did it upside down. I've seen two slight variations on the ways to do this stitch, so I'm choosing the one that I saw in, let me show you, Christen Brown's embroidery book. I really like this book for a lot of reasons, but she's got some interesting stitches in the back that I haven't found anywhere else. It was actually the first place that I ever saw this stitch. I've since found it in other places. With this one, we can mark it if we'd like. On this one, I think I'm going to go at about that same spacing again, and I think that will be plenty. I'm going to start over here at the seam, and I'm just going to come up. For this one, we're going to do very similar to what we did with that one. I'm going to do this one working the other direction. You could do either of these either directions. I'm going to have the thread coming up over the seam. I'm going to go down at the seam just like we did before and come up. But this time we're going to bring it all the way around instead of crossing over. So there's no crossover. And we're going to pull it through. And so there you see we have a nice little chain stitch. I'm going to come down and lock it. And then I'm going to come up just inside. Again, we want to keep this first loop from pulling over. And so now we're going to go down at our mark. We're going to come up. Take that thread that comes from the other one, go around your needle, loop it around. And make your locking stitch. And I also pulled my needle down the thread, and we're going to come up right inside that loop. So we hold that loop in place. Go down at my mark. And again, you're coming up perpendicular, loop all the way around, pull the needle through. So no twists in this one. And then go down. And then come up. See how that loop wants to go over? So we're going to come up and make sure we're catching that loop in. Now we're going to go down at our mark. And you could always put a line to make sure you get the tops of those nice and even. Go around. Pull the needle through. Anytime you're doing those sort of scooped stitches, it's a little harder in the frame. Just because you can't move it quite so much. And now we're going to come down and catch that loop in. Keep it where we want it to be. And you can see I just pulled that really tight. So you can always loosen it up a little bit if you want. My thread is coming down away from that seam. Go down at our mark. Come up perpendicular. So I'm under the needle, go around the needle. I'm all caught up on the frame there. Now we're going to go down. come up and catch that bottom thread. I debated putting this one in the buttonhole stitches since it's a chained buttonhole, but then I decided it would be a nice addition to our chain stitches, so I left it in this category, but it's definitely a crossover one, as is the Basque Stitch, which is really just a twisted chain buttonhole. My next mark is out in the seam allowance, so I'm just going to go stitch out into that seam allowance, give myself a little extra room, and that is our petal loop stitch. Looped blanket or chained blanket. Let me turn it over and knot it, and we'll go on to the next one. So our next stitch is Van Dyke Stitch, and we're going to do that one along this seam here. Now this is one that I definitely find helpful to mark a couple of lines, because otherwise my stitches don't stay as nice and even as I would usually like. So we're going to go, how far out do we want to go? This one can be pretty wide or it can be pretty narrow. So I think we're going to do this one 3/8 of an inch wide. So I'm making marks at 3/16 from the seam. So I'm going to just mark a line down each side of that. I think this one will look really good in our variegated thread here. So let's do that. We're going to start this one up near the top. This is another one of those stitches that is not always put into the chain stitch category. Sometimes it's put into a cross stitch category, but it forms a chain on the top. I think we're going to go ahead and start at this point on this one. And so to start this one, normally we would bring it off and cross it over here. I'm going to just bring it to the seam. And now we're going to go what would be straight across from there, or pretty close to it. And we're going to cross over just a little bit. So this first one, because we're working off of that diagonal seam, is not going to show it clearly just yet. But hold on and we'll get there. You can make these stitches really close together, or you can make them really far apart. I'm going to make them about 1/8 of an inch apart. And what we're going to do is we're going to cross underneath. We're not going under the fabric, but then we're going to come back over here. This is going to get clear as we come down here. Let's come down here about 1/8 of an inch below. And now I'm going to come up and I'm going to cross under that last stitch. Now you can just barely see that stitch there. We're going to cross under, and the more of these we do, the more apparent that chain becomes. And we're going to want to be straight across from that first stitch that we did and 1/8 of an inch below the other one, if you're going to copy what I'm doing spacing wise. And you see that little chain developing? But you can also see why it's also sometimes considered to be a cross stitch, because we're really crossing over, kind of looping through, and anytime we have a loop stitch, that really puts it into our chain stitch category. And you get that little chain going on the top, and subsequent rows make that chain more and more visible as you go. It's a really interesting textured stitch, and if you need to fill in a fairly large area, it really does a nice job. Now if you pull it too tight, you're not going to see the chain, so don't pull this one super tight. Here I pulled it tight, you won't be able to see that. So back it up just a little bit. Give it a little more space so that that loop will show. And then we're coming down 1/8 of an inch. And Each stitch will help separate the one above it and make it more obvious. And straight across and down. Now we're going to come down 1/8 of an inch on the left side. Loop it around and down on the right. So crossing under, go down. And again, I'm trying to keep those stitches fairly even on the outsides here, and I'm a little bit off there, I think. Feel like I'm pulling to the right with these a little bit, so I just want to watch, make sure I'm keeping that chain a little more centered, and that's going to be by not pulling it so tight. So up on the left, cross under the cross in the previous stitch. Watch my place, and I can always use my needle to kind of guide things where I want them to be. Come across straight. I think the other thing that I have been doing as I'm looking at this is I think my right leg I'm bringing out a little more parallel, and so that makes a difference as well. So here we're crossing over our previous ones. That last Basque stitch is going to disappear completely. Now thread under the cross of the previous stitch, which helps differentiate and make that top chain a lot more visible. There, and I could just use my finger to kind of hold that tension in so I could keep that nice and even. I do really like this one done in the variegated thread. I think it adds more interest that way. But it can look beautiful done in solid colors as well. Like with most of these stitches, you can just vary things up so much by changing the size of your thread. Is it solid or variegated? The width, the spacing. I've got a little knot on the back. I'm just trying to pull that through. And in all of that, I can tell I pulled that a little tight, so loosened it up a little bit. Now cross the thread through under that previous cross or chain. When I originally learned how to do Dyke Stitch, I didn't realize that it was supposed to be just threaded under, and I used to stitch through the fabric underneath that, and I couldn't figure out why it didn't look right. So make sure you're not going through the fabric in the center area. You're just going underneath the threads. And again, I always use the back of the needle when I'm threading through, so I don't stitch through the threads. There we go. So once you get the rhythm of this one, it actually goes pretty fast, even though there's a lot of stitches in it. I feel like I'm pulling over to the side again. Eighth of an inch down, thread underneath, straight across, go down on the right, up on the left, thread under both, down on the right, up on the left, thread under both, down on the right, going straight over. Now this is going to be the last one fully in our block, so thread underneath, don't pull it too tight, down on the right. But to keep the pattern going, because otherwise it'll look like I got a funny gap here, I need to keep coming down into that seam allowance. And I didn't mark my lines down that far, so I'm just eyeballing it. Thread underneath. And I think that's the last one that we need. And then down on the right. And that pulls that pattern. I don't know. I actually think we need one more because I think we need that loop right here. Make it look complete. Let's do one more. Thread under. Since that loop or crossover chain is going to be visible. And there we are. So I think that's complete. So no matter where my seam falls in here, it should look nice and complete. That is Van Dyke Stitch. I don't use that one nearly enough. I love the effect of it, especially in the variegated thread. So let me make a knot and we'll move on to the next one. The next stitch that we're going to do on this seam here. It has two well-known names. One is a twisted zigzag chain stitch, and the other is a Spanish knotted feather stitch. And I debated putting this in the feather stitch category, but I decided to do it in this one because I think it has those loops in it that make it, to me, feel more like a chain stitch when I have stitched this one in the past. We need to decide how wide. We have everything at about the same width here. So I'm thinking we need to do it a little bit different. I'm wondering if we go wider. I do think this one is better narrower though. I don't want to go too narrow. We're going to stick at the same one. It's working. Let's just go ahead and keep it up. I've gone at 3/8 of an inch. This particular stitch is one that looks more complicated than it really is. But I'll have to get out the book every time I stitch it. And I've been stitching this one for a long time. I'll put in a picture here of one that I did on that cream and white crazy quilt that was my very first crazy quilt. I've got my book off to the side. This one, we're going to be making a series of loops going one way and going another way, and then sort of coming up in between. So since I have a little diagonal start here, I'm going to start up in here. And I'm doing this one in a little bit thicker thread because I think it actually shows up better when it's done thicker. I'm going to add one more line here because I do think it helps on this one to have a line down the center. And usually I'm doing it on a seam and use that. We're not doing that this time. There, so we're just going to mark that. I just eyeballed the center and we're going to come down there. So to start this one, I'm going to come up here in the center. I'm going to come up just above that because I'm trying to mimic what would have come up above it. And now I'm coming out down here on my seam. So, or on the right. Okay, now I'm going to come up here again above, and this will make more sense once we get down to the second round of things here. So I have this, I went down, I'm going to twist my thread and I'm going to come up in between that cross. So there's my chain. And now we're going to do the same thing going the other direction, but this time I want to go down on that center line over this straight line here, and I'm going to come up down below over here. And now we're going to come and we're going to go down on that straight line, and this is where I want to make sure I'm catching that loop and coming up on the right hand line. And you can see the interesting pattern it starts to make. So we're going to go down on the center line now. There's my loop. I'm going to make sure it's got a twist in it. Come up on the left hand line. And now we're going to go over. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. So I want to be on that center line, and I made that stitch a little low on that last one, but I want to be in this hole in here on the center line. So go down, but I don't want that straight loop. I need that twist in there. So I'm going to come up on the right hand line. Now we're going to go over, and we're going to look for that gap over that straight one that came down. So I want to be a little ways away from that one above. And I'm just holding my thread so it automatically twists. Come up on the left. I'm going to try and do the same thing over here. I want to pre-put that twist in if I can. Now we're going in the gap down to the center, but on the other side of that stitch. So the center stitch sort of zigzags back and forth and up on the right. Now I've got to stop and think here what I'm doing. There's that straight stitch. I'm coming down on the center. There's my twist. And I'm coming up on the left side. And don't pull these too tight, because I think they're actually better if they're not too tight. So now we're going to go down on the center in that little triangle formed here. And there's my twist. Come up on the right line. So we're always going down on the center on the other, so if you see that loop that got that little crossover, we're going in on the other side of that cross, down on the center line. Make sure you get that loop in, that crossover in, and I think, there we go. Now to the other side, we're going to pull that down, go on the center line. There again, there's our loop, our cross loop or twist. I'm going to go down on the other side of that twist. Let's give that thread a little loop. Now we're going to go down on the center line on the other side of that. See, there's our cross going down there. And I need to form my twist up on the left. When you do this one, and you are doing them very close together, so I would be doing it a little narrower than what I'm currently doing. It looks very much like a braided trim. Now on the other side of that. Down on the... I'm realizing that I put my twist in a different direction on these two. I keep thinking these are not looking right. I'm actually going to pull that out and redo it, because if you look up here, my twist goes over, well, it came under, it twisted the other direction, and I liked that look much better. So I'm going to pull it out back to where I did it differently. So something to watch for. Pay attention to the direction of your twist and make sure you're doing it the same direction each time. I'm doing it the same direction on the ones on the left side, but not on the ones on the right. What are we doing here? Because I'm trying to pull it loose from the wrong spot. Sorry, just knocked that sideways. So this is the one. All of a sudden I was twisting it the wrong direction and it was not staying. So I need to twist it so that the thread comes over the top. And I think that does a better job of locking that in, and that's the same direction as these. So down in the center, and again my twist comes over the top. No, like this. Again, look at the direction of it when you're making those twisting marks. And now we're going to go down in the center in this triangle. There we go. That's all going the same direction now. And that locks that twist in better and it looks much more even. And so down in the center. Goes this way. Now that I've done that mistake once, now it's confusing me what I'm doing. Now we're going to come over, bring that thread down, go down on that center line. So I'm doing them a little closer together down here. And now we're going to pull this one down a little bit, go down on that center line. Need to pull my needle down the thread. I think we're going this way with it. So this one just takes a little time and paying attention to, nope, and that's wrong. See that? I got that twist wrong. Let's just back it up right away. We'll pull it out just a little bit. Need to go that way with it. So I'll come up there. And I'm going to do one more down here just to follow the pattern through. So we're going to pull this straight one down, go down in the center. Nope, see, I'm going to do it wrong again. So pay attention to those twists and make sure that the thread going over the top originates from the center. And I think with that, that's far enough that that pattern is complete. I do like it done a little closer together than I do further apart that we did here, but it's a really interesting stitch. I've seen GIMP trim that has a very similar appearance to it, and so it's just done much closer together. But that is our Spanish knotted feather stitch. I think that's the name it's most commonly known by, but again, also known as twisted zigzag chain stitch. So let me make a knot and then we're going to do the last one. This next stitch we're going to do is known as surprise chain stitch, and it is worked from the top down. We're going to go ahead and mark this one because I would like to keep it fairly even. Let's go ahead and do this one really big. We're just going to do 1/2 inch chains here. That'll take us out to our seam. We probably won't go quite out that far. Let's mark that in here. I don't want to have a knot out here that I'm going to cut off. What I'm going to do to start with on this one is I am going to make myself a fairly good sized catch stitch up here. I need to be able to fit 3 threads through that. And I'm going to leave it on the loose side. We are going to start with 1 chain. Go down. It's just your ordinary top-down chain stitch. I want to leave a little room here, and now we're going to come up just immediately below that, and we're going to make another one in the same spot. Now you may remember back in one of our earlier chain stitch videos, we did a couple of stitches. One was a broad chain. Let me see if I can find the blocks for you. We did this one called a heavy chain. It's linked very consistently throughout, so it makes a much heavier looking chain, much more solid. This is not going to look like that, but it feels in some ways like it starts off the same way. So there we have 2. Now I'm coming up again directly below the first one. And we're going to go through that catch stitch one more time. And down. And so you see we're going to leave them so they sit sort of side by side like that. This one I'm going to start just above my dot just so that I'm not migrating too far. Now this next one, we're not going to thread through all 3 of those. We're going to come up in that outer one and thread under the outer one. And we're going to go down. And then we're going to come up just below that. And we're just going to stitch through that top one again. If you leave them a little bit looser, you get more of this dimensional effect as it goes. I think you can almost leave a little bit more space under that bottom one and then under that. We're not going through the fabric at all on this. We're just threading underneath. And you get this really interesting kind of heavy chain that's surprisingly dimensional. Just looking at that thinking that needed to be not so tight on both sides. So let's loosen that one up a little bit more here so we can loosen it up on that side as well. Because you kind of want to see those ones underneath it as well. Now we're coming down, come up just below, thread through, go through that outer one again. Again, we want to try and stack them on top of one another. Don't pull them so tight that they don't lay nice and flat. And then coming up below and threading through that outer one. See if I can see where the needle is. And I'm using a heavier thread, so I'm using that chenille needle again. And down below. So you can see it forms sort of an interesting, textured, heavy chain. And then we're going through that, just that last one. Down on the other side of the seam, or your center line. Come up, down just below the first side. So you're always working in the same direction. Just through that outer one. Again, don't pull so tight. You want them to stack on top of one another. And then down below. And I realize that as I'm doing this, I'm leaving just a tiny bit more space with this last one underneath. And so up, and this is technically the outside one, but we've added so many stitches it kind of pulls it to the inside. And you get that sort of surprising effect of dimension with this one. So again, keep it loose. Now we're going to come down to the next one below. And we're threading through that outside, and I see I pulled that one tight again. Don't want to pull it that tight. Just thread through that outside one. Down on the other side. And you see as we add each subsequent layer, it changes it slightly on the top. I think it's called surprise, is because that outer one ends up being the inner one, but it gives it that dimension. And again, I pulled that a little tight. We want that a little looser. We want them all just to lay nice and flat next to one another. Now I have to come down and do this one or it's not going to look right. So we're going to come up, thread under that outer one on both sides. And I'm going to make shorter stitches here, but I'm going to put them a little further apart here. They're not going to be exact to what we've done, but I'm just trying to make this stitch look like it carries through, but I don't want to be stitching past my outer basting line because that's the area that will likely get trimmed away. And I don't want that to happen. And now we can do this one. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this one a little tighter just so it mimics that pattern. There we go. So there is our surprise chain stitch. It's an interesting stitch, a little different than anything else that we've done. And that finishes up our chain stitch blocks. Let me make a knot and we'll take a look at this block. There is our finished block. We've got our Basque Stitch, our Petal line stitch, Van Dyke, Spanish knotted feather stitch or twisted zigzag chain stitch, and then our surprise chain stitch. That finishes off the chain stitch portion of our sampler series. So I hope you've enjoyed these. There are so many more chain stitches that we could be doing, but I'm going to leave those for you to explore on your own. The ones we've done are the ones I think are most appropriate to crazy quilting. Let me know what your favorite is. I hope you've enjoyed following along with this last group of chain stitches. I have really been enjoying this sampler series so far. It's allowing me to revisit stitches I haven't done in a long time, and it's challenged me to find a few new ones as well. Thanks so much for watching. Have a beautiful day, happy stitching, and I will see you in the next video.